I never expected my world to shift so profoundly the day my father came home and told me he had met someone. He stood in the kitchen, hands nervously clasping a coffee mug he hadn't sipped from, and told me her name was Elise. His voice was steady, but I could hear the anticipation tucked beneath his words. Elise, the woman who, over the course of the next few months, would transform my entire perception of love, boundaries, and personal truth, not by her actions, but by the way her presence forced me to confront parts of myself I had never examined. I was 17, caught in that peculiar and uncomfortable space between adolescence and adulthood. I was learning how to be responsible, how to manage emotions, how to observe people and read between the lines. And then came Elise, a woman whose grace was undeniable. She was warm, eloquent, elegant in the kind of way that made people stop talking when she entered the room, not because she demanded it, but because she carried a stillness that commanded attention. I wanted to understand her. I wanted to know how someone could carry so much mystery and calmness all at once. From the start, there was nothing outwardly strange about her behavior. She was kind. She asked me about school, laughed at my jokes, brought home my favorite snacks from the store. Everything she did felt so considerate, so intuitive, as if she'd known me for years rather than weeks. And yet there was something else, something silent and unspoken that swirled in the air. When we were alone in a room, the tension that made me more self-aware, more careful about my words, my posture, my glances. I chalked it up to adjustment. New family dynamics are messy, emotions are unpredictable, but still it lingered. I remember the first time I noticed that undercurrent distinctly. It was a rainy afternoon, and Dad was working late. Elise and I were both home, and I offered to make tea. We sat in the living room, her curled up on one side of the couch, me on the other, the soft hum of the storm outside filling the gaps in our conversation. We talked about books, about music, about how odd it was to blend two lives together when you're no longer young enough to be easily molded. She laughed softly and said, "People think relationships are about sensing calendars and preferences. They forget how much of it is about understanding silence." Her words hung in the air long after she stopped speaking. It wasn't flirtation. It wasn't seduction. It was something else. Emotional intimacy disguised as conversation. I felt seen in a way I didn't understand, and maybe that's what unsettled me most. Because it wasn't something I had been seeking, it just was. From that day forward, something shifted. I began to pay closer attention to everything. The way her eyes lingered on mine when she asked how my day was. The way her laughter softened when it was just the two of us. The way I caught myself watching her move through the kitchen, admiring not just her grace, but her calm confidence. It was confusing, deeply confusing. I wasn't in love, but I was emotionally tangled. I tried to talk myself out of it. I tried to focus on school, on friends, on everything else. But you can't talk your way out of a storm once you're in the middle of it. Then one weekend, my father had to travel for a conference, just Elise and me at home. I remember standing in the hallway outside the kitchen, just listening. She was humming softly as she made herself tea. It should have been a normal sound, but it felt weighted, as if that simple melody carried with it every unspoken moment we'd ever shared. I walked in, offered to help, and we ended up sitting at the dining table, talking about how strange it was being alone in the house. It was all innocent, all surface level, until she asked, "You've been quiet lately. Is something bothering you?" I froze. I didn't know how to answer, because yes, something was bothering me, but that something wasn't anything I could say out loud. So I shrugged and mumbled, "Just thinking a lot." She tilted her head. "About?" I avoided her eyes. "Life stuff." She didn't press, but the pause was long and heavy. Looking back now, I think we both knew we were approaching a boundary, not a physical one but an emotional line that, once crossed, changes how you see someone forever. But that moment passed, no touch, no confession, just the quiet knowledge that we had come close to an edge and stopped ourselves. After that, we avoided being alone. For weeks, our conversations became brief and awkward. We tiptoed around each other. When my father was present, the three of us functioned like a normal family. But beneath the surface, I was unraveling doubt. It wasn't that I wanted her not in the way people might assume. It was that I was drawn to her energy, her attention, the space she created. I wanted to feel seen like that, but not at the cost of someone else's trust, especially not my father's. One afternoon, I came home early and found her outside watering the plants. She looked up and smiled, not wide, not flirtatious, just a soft, tired smile. "Back already?" she asked. "Yeah. Teacher canceled class. Want some lemonade?" I hesitated, then nodded. We sat on the porch steps, sipping quietly, and, for a long time, neither of us spoke. It wasn't awkward, it was just real. "I think we've both been feeling things we don't know how to name," she said finally, her voice low. "And I think it's time we start putting names to them so they don't control us." I didn't say anything, but I nodded. She continued, "I care about you, and I respect you, which is why I need you to know that whatever space was starting to grow between us, it has to end, before it becomes something we regret." That conversation, more than any moment before or after, brought clarity. It wasn't romantic love. It wasn't lust. It was emotional enmeshment. I was drawn to the care she offered, to the safety she represented. But it wasn't mine to take, and it wasn't fair to her or to my father. That day marked a shift in me. I began asking different questions. Who did I want to be? What kind of man was I becoming? What did I need to heal within myself so I didn't confuse care for connection? How do we process complicated emotions with dignity instead of acting on impulse? I spent more time journaling, more time reflecting. I started therapy through a school counselor, not because I was broken, but because I needed help sorting through emotions that felt too big to handle alone. I learned about boundaries, about emotional responsibility, about how attraction isn't always physical. It's often about attention, validation, and unhealed wounds. In those months, Elise and I began rebuilding something different. We didn't pretend nothing had happened. We just acknowledged that we both needed to grow. Eventually, she became someone I respected deeply, not as a romantic figure, but as a person who showed me the danger of unresolved longing and the power of choice. She never took advantage of my vulnerability, even when the lines blurred. Instead, she modeled restraint, grace, and responsibility. When they eventually married, I stood at the ceremony not as a bitter teenager with secrets, but as a young man who had faced a difficult emotional truth and emerged wiser. Now, years later, I look back on that season of my life not with shame, but with gratitude, because sometimes life teaches us through tension. Sometimes the most valuable lessons are born in the moments we almost go too far but choose not to. Elise taught me that love isn't always clean or clearly defined, that sometimes it shows up in messy, complicated ways, but we are defined, not by our emotions but by our decisions. I'm still learning, still growing, but that season taught me one of the most important lessons I'll ever learn: the ability to recognize when something isn't meant to be and the courage to walk away before it becomes something you can't undo is a quiet kind of strength. And that strength saved me.